Donald Trump says he will speak with Taiwan's Lai Ching-te on possible arms sales. Hong Kong and Guangdong hit by massive rainstorms overnight. And Cuba reacts furiously to Washington's indictment of Raul Castro. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters on Wednesday he'll speak to Taiwan leader Lai Ching-te before deciding on a possible U.S. arms sales to the island. Trump also hailed his relationship with President Xi Jinping as amazing on the back of a two-day summit during his China visit. Beijing has fiercely pushed against U.S. official exchanges with Taiwan, warning Washington should not send any wrong signal to Taiwan independence forces. Danny Zhou has the details.
When asked about whether he would call Taiwan's Lai Ching-te before he makes the decision on the weapons package, U.S. President Donald Trump has this to say.
Well, I'll speak to him. I speak to everybody. We have that situation very well in hand. We had a great meeting with President Xi. It was amazing, actually. It was amazing. Many of you were there. We'll work on that, the Taiwan problem.
In Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun says the U.S. should not be sending any wrong signal on the Taiwan issue by officially communicating with Lai.
China's opposition against the U.S. official exchanges with China's Taiwan region and the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan remains consistent, clear, and firm.
The Foreign Ministry urges the U.S. to abide by the One China principle and the three China-U.S. joint communiques and take concrete actions to uphold peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, the Financial Times reported that Chinese authorities have moved to hold up a proposed summer visit by the Pentagon's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Kobe. Officials signaled they cannot approve the visit until Trump decides how he will proceed with the sale of the arms sale package worth $14 billion, reportedly including anti-drone equipment and air defense missile systems. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Upper air disturbance has brought about unstable weather conditions along the southern Chinese coast. Earlier this morning, the observatory issued the first red rainstorm signal of the year, lasting for a period of around 2.5 hours. The highest rainfall was recorded in the northern New Territories, with some areas recording rainfall of above 200 millimeters. Timothy Lee has more.
Hong Kong has been battered by harsh weather conditions starting last night, with the observatory issuing the amber rainstorm signal at 9 p.m. yesterday. Among the areas that experienced the heaviest rainfall was the northern New Territories, which saw cases of vehicles breaking down and being stuck in the deluge. A minibus was trapped near the Hong Kong Golf Club, but none of the 13 passengers on board were injured. The heavy downpour continued well into the night, with weather authorities issuing the red rainstorm signal at 2:40 a.m. According to the observatory, the heavy rain and thunderstorms were a result of an upper air disturbance's ongoing effects on the Pearl River Delta region. The heaviest rainfall was recorded in areas such as Pat Hung, Compton, Shengshui, Takuling, and Sha Tao Kang. The observatory issued the special announcement on flooding in the northern New Territories, with various stores in the region reporting cases of their goods being drenched by the flood. This shopkeeper said the surging water reached up to his ankles and estimated losses of close to $3,000. Farms in the northern New Territories were also not spared from the deluge. This farmer tried to collect his produce but wasn't quick enough, stressing that the heavy rain appeared out of nowhere. He only managed to save half of the watermelons he grew. The Drainage Services Department received at least 7 cases of flooding and deployed its mobile powerful pumping robot to handle drainage issues near Shengshui's Choyun Road. Residents were relieved this morning when the observatory downgraded the red to amber rainstorm signal at 5:15 a.m. before dropping the signal entirely at 9:30 a.m. Meanwhile, weather authorities forecast weather conditions will improve by tomorrow at the earliest, adding that the weather will remain hot throughout the Buddha's birthday weekend. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Severe weather continues to pound many provinces and cities across the mainland. In Guangdong province, torrential rain has precipitated flooding and bridge collapses in multiple districts. Heavy downpours have lashed a number of districts of Shenzhen starting Wednesday night. Meteorological authorities at one point issued the highest level red alert. Flooding impinged the Shenzhen-Zhongshan link, inundating a 100-meter section of the undersea tunnel. Unstable weather also disrupted flights, with at least 90 departures delayed at Shenzhen Airport. Meteorological authorities say due to the influence of the southwest monsoon, torrential rain hit coastal Guangdong cities, with 34 towns and sub-districts in the province having logged more than 250 millimeters of rainfall. In Gaozhou, Maoming, river surges also damaged bridges. In Jiangmen, too, floodwater washed away sections of a bridge after the area recorded 449 millimeters of precipitation, with a citywide suspension of school and work. In a town in Yangjiang, rainfall reached as high as 770 millimeters. Rescue workers had to deploy inflatable boats to rescue those stranded. 8,500 residents were evacuated overnight. Starting Thursday, Guangdong entered the traditional rainy season around the Dragon Boat Festival, when the South China Sea monsoon intensifies and combines with the northward expansion of the subtropical high-pressure system, which often brings prolonged heavy rainfall across southern China. Authorities expect the heavy downpours are here to stay through this month, with Guangdong's provincial rainfall expected to reach around 450 millimeters, potentially breaking historical records. Ride-hailing platform Uber says introducing a cap on the number of licenses for their drivers could ratchet up fares by some 70% and double passengers' waiting times. On the other hand, the local taxi trade urges the government to consider the cabbie's livelihood. While the government's consultations over the cap on ride-hailing license numbers continue, earlier proposed limit was set between 10,000 and 15,000. Uber says if the cap is set at 15,000, the number of active drivers on the platform would immediately be halved from the current 30,000, significantly impacting service reliability. For instance, for journeys from Hong Kong Disneyland to Wan Chai, the fares during peak periods could rise from $250 to $430.
Moving too quickly on a tight limit could cause a major supply shock to riders. When you limit the number of cars, wait times naturally go up. Our numbers show that during busy hours, wait times could double. Fares could also rise by as much as 70% at peak times. This would change the convenient, high-quality service that Hong Kong relies on every day.
So how many licenses will be enough?
The cap isn't for Uber to set, so we are not sat here today telling the government how many licenses to issue. Our request is to take into account the real-world demand and level of service that people provide right now. It is very unusual, even in the first place, to have a cap on the quota of number of licenses. You know, that is incredibly unusual.
Uber also suggested that the government review the number of licenses on a quarterly or at least half-yearly basis to ensure supply keeps pace with market demand. The taxi trade, meanwhile, says taxis on the road currently have an average occupancy rate of just around 30%. They say the number of ride-hailing licenses should range between 3,500 and 3,800. An industry representative notes after the licensing mandate takes effect, fewer ride-hailing drivers will work part-time as it costs more to acquire the licenses, so it won't affect fares as much. He also calls on the government to consider cabbies' livelihood and assist industry tech upgrades over the long term. U.S. federal prosecutors have announced criminal charges against former Cuban President Raul Castro in a 1996 downing of civilian planes flown by Miami-based exiles as the Trump administration escalates pressure on the island's socialist government. Tracy Furness has more.
The indictment accuses Castro of ordering the shoot-down of two small planes in 1996, operated by the exile group Brothers to the Rescue. Castro, who turns 95 next month, was Cuba's defense minister at the time.
It's long awaited, but let it be not just a symbolic moment. You know, I have in my hands directly that indictment that lists Raul Castro. He has to be brought to justice. And what that means in reality is it's removing him from power, removing the people around him from power, and bringing a true democratic elections to Cuba. That's what we're going to need in order to have change in that island.
I think it's incredibly exciting. I think it's a confirmation of the Department of Justice commitment to victims, as well as commitment to accountability for bad actors, even when they are a head of state.
Cuban officials reacted angrily Wednesday to the U.S. charge against Raul Castro.
Here in Cuba, officials are reacting angrily to the U.S. Justice Department announcement of an indictment against Cuban leader Raul Castro. The case goes back to 1996, when Cuban fighter jets shot down 2 planes operated by the Miami exile group Brothers to the Rescue, killing 4 people. Cuba says the planes violated Cuba airspace and ignored repeated warnings before they were shot down. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel accused the U.S. of lying and said that the move was politically motivated and had no legal basis.
Cuba's recent history began in 1959 when Fidel Castro's rebels took power, ousting dictator Fulgencio Batista. Relations between the new government and the U.S. soon soured over the trials and executions of Batista's loyalists. In 1960, Cuba nationalized U.S. businesses and the U.S. declared an embargo on most exports to Cuba. In 1960, it broke diplomatic relations. Castro declared Cuba a socialist state, and a day later, the U.S. sponsored a doomed operation to topple Castro at the Bay of Pigs. In 1962, the world came close to nuclear war when the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles in Cuba and the U.S. responded with a blockade, a standoff known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. U.S. President John F. Kennedy agreed not to invade Cuba again. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
A Spanish airline is suspending flights to Cuba amid the island country's energy crisis. World to Fly is the latest in a series of cutbacks by airlines and is another major blow to Cuban travelers and tourists. The strict energy blockade by the U.S. has left Cuba without oil for its economy, including fuel for aircraft. World to Fly has recently been refueling in nearby Dominican Republic. The airline was especially popular with Cubans due to its cheap tickets and generous checked baggage allowance, a welcome option for those who needed to bring items into the island during a time of material shortages. And still ahead, Israeli minister stirs outrage after taunting detained activists. Life goes on in African town at the center of the Ebola crisis. And Hong Kong's push to teach students more about aerospace technology. Welcome back. Israel's national security minister drew a sharp rebuke from his boss and triggered a backlash abroad after he released videos of taunting and telling detained activists from a flotilla that tried to get past the Israeli blockade of Gaza that they should be imprisoned for a very long time. Tracy Furness has more.
Free, free Palestine!
Quiet, quiet, the guard says, as he forcefully lowers the activists to the ground. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israeli National Security Minister, waving an Israeli flag, saying, "Welcome to Israel, we are the landlords." The activists from the flotilla that tried to reach Gaza seen handcuffed on the ground. Ben-Gvir has drawn sharp rebuke from his boss and triggered a backlash abroad after the release of the videos. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said videos of Ben-Gvir taunting detained flotilla activists showed a total disrespect and violation of basic standards of human dignity in how people should be treated, and demanded an explanation from Israeli authorities.
I mean, we see these totally disgraceful scenes in this video shared by Israeli Cabinet Minister Ben-Gvir, which shows a total disrespect and violation of basic standards of human dignity in the way that people were being treated. Completely appalled, and we have sent a summons to the Israeli embassy because we need the urgent explanation as to how this could happen.
Meanwhile, on Iran, US President Donald Trump told reporters Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will do whatever I want him to do.
He's a very, very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do, and he's a great guy. To me, he's a great guy. Don't forget, he was a wartime prime minister, and he's not treated right in Israel, in my opinion. I'm right now at 99% in Israel. I could run for prime minister, so maybe after I do this, I'll go to Israel, run for prime minister. I had a poll this morning, I'm 99%, so that's good. But no, he's a wartime prime minister, and I just don't think they treat him well.
Mr. President, what do you do?
I think they have a president over there that treats him very poorly.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Even amid a rapidly spreading Ebola outbreak, people in the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo are going about life as usual. Streets are still busy with plenty of traffic, and people walk through town to carry out their daily business. Behind the normal-looking scenes are almost 600 suspected cases, with 139 suspected deaths. In Rampara, healthcare workers handled several bodies on Wednesday, and officials here said the outbreak is not yet under control. Meanwhile, an American doctor who was in contact with people infected with Ebola has been taken to Czech Republic's capital, Prague, for observation. The doctor shows no symptoms and will be kept in isolation for 3 weeks for observation. In response to the Ebola outbreak in Africa, the Hong Kong government has issued a red travel alert for the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Travel to the country is advised to be avoided unless absolutely necessary. The government stresses that no confirmed cases of Ebola have been recorded locally. Meanwhile, the planned 18-day strike by Samsung's union members has been suspended after the company and its workers come to an agreement which was mediated by the South Korean government. The deal sparked relief across the country, as Samsung accounts for about a quarter of South Korea's exports. A strike would inflict much damage to the economy and dent global chip supply. Performance bonus, the final issue to be resolved, would now be paid to workers in stock rather than cash, and that could lower the immediate financial burden on Samsung, analysts say. Hong Kong's consumer price index for April rose by 1.7% year-on-year. The government said overall inflation is moderate. Netting out the effects of all government's one-off relief measures, the rate of increase in the composite CPI in April was 1.6%, the same as in March. The highest price increases was for electricity, gas and water at 5.5%, followed by miscellaneous services and transport. Prices for durable goods fell 1.9% in April. Looking ahead, the government spokesman said, as international oil prices remain elevated, the feed-through process to fuel-related components in consumer prices should continue in the coming months. The final impact would hinge on the evolving situation in the Middle East. Financial Secretary Paul Chan is continuing his visit to Europe. During his stay in Brussels, Belgium on Wednesday, he met with European Union officials and European business representatives to promote Hong Kong's advantages. Chan says amid the challenging international political and economic environment, Hong Kong, under one country, two systems, maintains its status as a free port with a free flow of capital, information and talent. He also visited Beijing's head of mission to the European Union, Taiwan, and ambassador extraordinary to Belgium, Fei Shengchao, to discuss China-Europe relations and the latest developments in Hong Kong. Chan's next stop is Zurich in Switzerland. A man has died after falling from a flat at Yap Min Chun, a public housing estate in Sha Tin. Police took his wife and son away to assist in the investigations. The family of three resided at a higher floor unit at Ming Yu Lao. Part of the podium outside the building has been cordoned off. The case happened at around 10 last night when police received a report from a man saying his father fell from the unit. Reportedly, the father and son argued in the kitchen over tuition fees. The mother tried to intervene, but the father allegedly fell from the flat during the dispute after losing balance. Many are eager to know whether a Hong Kong astronaut will take part in the upcoming launch of the Shenzhou 23 crewed spaceship. With the nation's aerospace sector developing at a rapid pace, the city's aerospace education still has a lot of catch-up work to do. This, as representatives in the education sector said, more needs to be done to increase local interest in the subject. Timothy Lee has more.
With their eggs on the line, students at this Braemar Hill Secondary School competed against each other to find out who made the most secure craft that can perform a safe landing. The event incorporated elements of the nation's aerospace development, which simulated the process that astronauts go through on board the Shenzhou spacecraft. This student says she found the experience interesting, adding that the competition taught her that every landing is different. While this teacher noted he hopes the experience could generate interest in the aerospace sector among local students. But despite the Education Bureau having already strengthened primary and secondary aerospace education, various representatives in Hong Kong's education sector believe the adjustments have a limited effect. Choi Sai-hung, the chairman of the Aerospace Education School Network, stressed schools simply do not spend enough time on the subject, adding that students already have too many other subjects to focus on. He noted that the city could generate more excitement surrounding the topic if the business sector becomes more involved in aerospace development. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thank you for watching.